Welcome to the Horrors of the Crypt episode. I am your host, JoeMagician, and let me take off this screen share for a second. Oh. Hello, we're here. You guys can unmute.
Oh.
Hi.
All right, there we go. Got everything set up. Woo! All right. So, in case you can't tell, this is going to be a Shining heavy episode because this was originally the Halloween stream that got bumped for the awesome Three Witches stream.
Oh my god.
What was that?
That was my Three Witches laugh. I just,
Oh my god.
Getting in that Halloween mood.
Yep. On after Thanksgiving doing a Halloween stream. That's how this works.
Samhain forever.
I can't get this doc to go to the right place.
Who needs docs? Who needs documents?
I need a doc, so I know what I'm saying. That's not correct either. That's okay. This is okay for right now.
Great.
So there's no video for this one. This is just going to be a live stream. This is an idea me and Miguel or Michael came up with just for funsies, and we actually found a lot more than we thought there would be. It started off as a dumb idea, and it became like a good idea.
As so many of ours do. So few make it to that second stage.
It's very true. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Okay, hello everyone. I am Michael, also known as Bookshelfstud. I've been on a few streams with JoeMagician before. Of course, we do Maester Monthly together. And amongst my many titles, I am Bookshelfstud, maker of pasta, breaker of Greek curses, the mad axe of Maester Monthly himself.
Mother of cooking videos.
Mother of cooking videos. Mamma mia.
The Mamma Mia of Maester Monthly.
Oh.
And also joining me this time is, of course, Sanrixian.
Hey, party people, what's up? It's me, your favorite dank meme generator, Hand of the Dragon, art person, the third M of the dragon, the smallest M of the dragon.
The small with an O.
Small.
Small dragon.
Small dragon.
Small. So small. I'm going to be doing some kind of trippy Jack Torrance inspired John Goes Ham on the Nightfort piece for you tonight on this fine Saturday evening. Trying to work out his sword right now.
It's going to be real spooky. It's going to be real awesome. So that's basically what Mallory just said is the basic idea of it.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I mean,
Hashtag spoiler.
Hashtag spoilers of this live stream. The basic idea is that when John comes back from the dead in the books, he will not be just sort of like a little angry and then kill a few Night's Watchmen that betrayed him and then kind of go on his way. We're going to speculate that instead he's going to be much more in the Stoneheart vein of the whites that come back, a vengeful ghost. A ghost.
A ghost.
See what I did there?
Like the
ghost. And
like the dog.
And talk about a lot of the actual foreshadowing and evidence we found for this that is a lot more than I thought there would be. I thought it was just like I said, I thought it was just a dumb idea. It is actually not. It's pretty cool. So before we get started though, let's do our opening question, which, because this was the quote-unquote Halloween stream, it is, what is your favorite horror movie or story? Miguel, why don't you go?
Favorite horror movie or story? I think there are some that are high quality that I like a lot. I mean, I was reading Stephen King from a very young age, and some of Lovecraft stuff has really spooked me. But honestly, I'm going to go in a different direction with it. Paranormal Activity, the first one,
Solid.
Oh yeah,
because
definitely.
when I was a wee lad, that movie was rated R, and I was not old enough to see it.
Oh my god.
And I snuck into the theater to see it, and it was so worth sneaking into the theater, and that augmented the experience. And I never slept again. So, there's that. That's that. I actually, when I was, this is an anecdote that connects to it. When I was in high school, after seeing Paranormal Activity, I made a little video called Normal Activity, which I think I never posted on YouTube, but it's out there somewhere. And it's just how in the movie there's the black and white footage of them sleeping at night, all sped up, so like when they roll over. Yeah. I did that, but it was just me lying in my bed completely still for like 5 minutes. It was just sped up, and then it ends. It was Normal Activity.
You're the best, Michael. Just see the end.
So dumb. So Paranormal Activity. That's what I'm going with.
Solid choice.
I mean, that movie did scare the crap out of me when I was in high school too.
Yeah.
It was one of the first to do the like found footage, like after Blair Witch. It was one of the first, like, in horror tropiness to do that.
And to do it pretty well. Like,
and to do it well on a low budget. They only had like so much money for that.
Yeah, it was a couple $100,000.
Make it terrifying in the aspect that where they never actually show you like the demon. It was so well done.
Yeah.
The Fourth Kind is another one I would highly recommend that came out around that time.
Oh yeah.
With aliens, and it's the one with the owls is the aliens. That's on my like top 100 list.
Wait, owls is aliens.
The owls are like
Uh-oh.
I don't want to ruin it.
There's one right there.
The owls are not what they seem in that movie.
Twin Peaks reference.
If Twin Peaks, like the elements of Twin Peaks that are horror, are actually my favorite horror.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Twin Peaks is really good at that.
Yeah.
Mallory, we actually talked about this beforehand, and our favorite horror story movie is the same one. So why don't you go ahead?
Well, I can come up with another one if you want to go ahead with
No.
first.
It's fine to talk about the same one because it is so good.
Well, The Shining is probably my favorite horror movie of all time. I watched it probably 50 times while I was doing my senior film, just because I thought it was the storytelling and the mood and the atmosphere and everything was just so great. And I've read the books. It's been a way longer time since I've read the books than I've actually watched the movie. Like, me and Matt also talked about how this Halloween was the first Halloween in many moons where we haven't done our annual Shining watching, which we found out was a tradition we both had, which is pretty cool.
A separate tradition we both accidentally have.
Yeah, we just happen to have. We may differ on beer taste, but we definitely have similar movie and music taste, which is cool. But yeah, I just think it's such a great story. I love the idea of just like what happens to Jack at the end. I love the mystery aspect of it. I just love, okay, I'm going to admit it. I kind of have a little thing for Jack Nicholson.
Dude.
But aside from that, I just think it's a really interesting story. Maddie, sweetie, I love you, but I'm going to kill you.
Please don't kill me.
That was really good.
Let's not do that.
Oh, I'm just kidding. Mostly.
It is one of the. I don't like horror movies. It's not my thing. I don't like being scared. I don't like slashers. Like lots of blood. Not my thing. However, hang on. I need to stop presenting Mallory. Okay. The Shining is definitely my thing. It's that and like Silence of the Lambs are two of my truly favorite movies, and they're so good, especially on like Halloween, like Mallory was talking about. Just the way it's set up and the slow burn, and you're not really sure what's happening between the supernatural, if Jack's just going insane, how the hotel is like closing in around them. And actually, the book or the Shining is very good too, but much more in a Lovecraftian horror kind of way, where it's really obvious early on in that book that the hotel is actually haunted, whereas Kubrick does a good job of making it more ambiguous for a lot of it. And Gurm does that a lot too in A Song of Ice and Fire, where you're, except for the others in the beginning and when the dragons return, before that, you're not really sure how much of what the ancient lore and legends are true. And you can kind of go back and forth. Even still, people Euron, for like an example, he hasn't really done anything magical yet, but people are convinced he's going to because of a lot of the kind of setup that that is emblematic of The Shining does, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, there's just so many beautiful symbolic moments and trippy moments in The Shining where you almost have to watch it so many times that you can fully comprehend like what the hell it is they're trying to say. Like the first time I ever watched The Shining, I was super young. I was probably like only 16 or 17, and I'm like, why is that bear man giving that guy a blowjob? And I just
didn't
didn't
understand what that was
at all. And I had been reading Stephen King since a very, very young age, like unbeknownst to my mother. But yeah, I was just like, what is this? And then like the more I read into it, and when I actually read the book and I learned about The Shining and like the connection and the hotel itself being like a haunted entity, that's a common horror trope that I feel like is becoming more and more on the surface of modern horror. Like if you guys have seen House on Haunted Hill on Netflix, that is definitely like an evil possessed house, which is just a theme that I love.
And it's actually a theme that works well for what we're talking about, because the Nightfort is basically the Overlook Hotel in terms of like just how many random ghosts there are and all these crazy stories about it. And like as you uncover more about it, it's like, what the hell's really going on with this place? And especially with some of the stories, like in particular, Maddox, almost the way it's written with him going from room to room and taking off his shoes so he can't be heard and slaughtering them in their sleep. It's so very much like what happens with the previous caretaker of the Overlook, Mr. What's his name? God, I can't remember his name. The bald guy that Jack meets in the restroom.
Yeah.
It's and George and Stephen King are very good friends. They going back decades, so it wouldn't surprise me if the origin of Maddox is him as an homage to The Shining that he took and made his own, like he does so often.
Well, there are real world parallels to like the idea of a haunted place influencing things, like the what was his name? The axe murderer of like the 1920s, and he would pass over you if you like played jazz music.
Oh, Axeman. They did that
Axeman.
in that FX show, the American Horror.
Yeah,
American Horror Story. Yeah,
yeah, they did. He was in love with the lady who was the super badass lady who smokes 1,000 packs of cigarettes a day. I can't remember her name, but she's awesome. I love her so much. You know who I'm talking about.
I do.
She was the queen. She was the supreme in the Coven season.
Yeah. Jessica Lange.
Jessica Lange.
Thank you. Yeah. But it's a real thing in history. Like they've I think it was in Louisiana. And yeah, I like that kind of thing because it's like, okay, it's the same idea of an axe and a crazy murder story and a house possessing, or the energy that lingers necessarily from where evil crimes are done kind of like stays, kind of like Hair in the Black. And obviously targs are on the brain because of fire and blood, but
like some like almost like ripples that it creates in like the dreamscape.
In the what, Michael? What's that?
In the what now?
Ripples in the dreamscape?
That sounds like a good essay that I should write.
It sounds like a good idea for also a upcoming video about like Targaryens and anyway.
No, that sounds like bullshit.
Yeah, it's probably not any good. It's probably just magical bullshit. But yeah, I think definitely as we're talking about this, the Nightfort is really the horror, I would say the epicenter of A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah,
everything we learn about it is ridiculous, Lovecraftian, Stephen King like. It's almost like he just wanted to include a place because Harrenhal wasn't scary enough, and then just had Bran go into it. Doesn't just scare the living crap out of the kid. But before we get to that part of it, let's start off with how this links into the current story, why these are more than just weird myths and legends that George is doing an homage to. So that's Michael, why don't you start with your excellent essay?
Yeah, well, so a lot of this comes back to Jonathan McSnow, the protagonist at the wall. John, obviously at the end of, and I'm going to be referencing in this, we're going to be talking about an essay I wrote almost 3 years ago. Titled Return of the White Wolf. Jon is coming back. I'm going to try to argue Jon is 100% dead. Jon will come back, and because of the unique sort of warging and soul storage and all that, he's going to come back more wolfy and more savage. The idea ties into some of Jon's personality that's already there. And we see this with Lady Stoneheart too. There's a few moments in the books when Jon lashes out in anger. When he's fighting Iron Emmett in the yard, there's this, in the end, Halder and Horse had to pull him away from Iron Emmett, one man on either arm. And everyone's like, Jon, enough. Like you beat this guy like to death, because he got so peeved. And he got peeved for specific
really
character reasons. But there's this sort of deep anger and this rage in Jon, a desire to kill, and this very wolf-like desire, which he's been able to repress thus far. And Catelyn did the same kind of thing. There's another thing that I wrote once about how Catelyn, before she died, spoiler alert, she dies.
What?
Thinks a lot about how she wishes she could just like kill all these, like just get it all done. All these people who are causing all these problems, and all the people who have wronged her family. And obviously she doesn't, and she can't, and then she dies. And when she comes back, she is unleashed. And Jon, I think to a certain extent, we're going to see something like that, where he comes back with that savage wolf, bloodlust in him.
Wolf blood.
Yeah, the wolf blood will really rise in him. And of course, bastard blood is also a thing in the World of Ice and Fire. Even in Fire and Blood, it's referenced a few times. Bastard characters have, there's fire in bastard blood, that they are more brutal and savage and more likely to go off. So the idea is that as Jon comes back in The Winds of Winter, he's not going to come back as he did in the show, where he was, a little peeved and confused and depressed and sort of aimless. That in the books, he will be hell-bent on just righting the wrongs and slaying things that piss him off, basically anything. I mean, his last moments were him about to march off to rescue Arya to kill Ramsay. So, he's going to come back with that same sort of purposeful, bloody-mindedness.
Definitely. And one thing that links up very well with this is that Lady Stoneheart's death, the way she died, that she was betrayed, is so similar to the way Jon goes down, where it kind of comes out of nowhere. There's knives everywhere. And when Stoneheart comes back, she is single-minded about what she wants to do. She wants revenge on anybody. And that happens too, kind of with Beric Dondarrion. He comes back and becomes obsessed with completing Ned's orders to bring the Mountain to justice.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. There's definitely that when someone dies, they come back focused on the last sort of purpose they had. At least that's the pattern we've seen so far. I mean, it's not necessarily a rule, but it's definitely a pattern that we can observe in the series with the several characters who have come back from the dead.
It's almost like setting up a prototype of what we should expect from everything that we've seen, which is basically exactly what you just said. Sorry.
No, you're right. I mean, that's the right way to say it, though. Yeah.
And the other way this works really well is the way that Jon is almost certain to be brought back from the dead, that is unique to him, that we don't have from Stoneheart and Beric, is that he's almost certainly gone into Ghost as his second life. And we not only will that will preserve him probably in a way that we don't see with Beric and Cat, who come back and talk about how they've come back from the void. Well, Beric does. Stoneheart doesn't say anything because of her throat, but
she don't speak. Yeah,
she don't speak, but she's clearly been affected by what she's seen in death.
Yes. And
there's also a thing with second lives and skin changing, where the characters are warned over and over again, the longer you stay in your animal, the more your minds merge. And Ghost is not a normal animal.
Exactly.
Ghost, it has a huge personality. He is almost a separate character on his own. And not only that, this is important for what we're talking about. Ghost has attacked Night's Watch brothers before, or come close to it at Jon's orders. He's attacked Corin Halfhand. He snapped at the neck of somebody that was bullying Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ghost is not afraid of attack. He also attacked Othor, or
he attacked the Whites.
He attacked the Whites, and they were dressed as Night's Watch brothers. So Ghost is not afraid to attack Night's Watch people in a way that Jon is.
No, yeah, there's an argument to be made that Ghost is, Jon's not 100%, but Jon's id, the base instincts that he has, that desire to right wrongs by any means necessary. Ghost definitely is that for Jon. So if Jon goes into Ghost, he's just gonna absorb more of that, in the same way that Beric and Catelyn absorbed the void. I mean, their souls went into nothingness and came back missing pieces. Jon's soul will go into Ghost and come back with a little hairier.
Yeah, it's, and not only that, Ghost internally, from when we see when Jon's skin changes him in his dreams, Ghost has a real problem with impulse control. He doesn't like people telling him what to do. He's single-minded, and he's very connected to the old gods, which, as we've seen, are much more savage in nature than any of the other religions. And the northern culture itself is brutal, and that comes from their religion. So if Jon's coming back with parts of a wolf that has trouble controlling itself, has no problem attacking humans, and is hellbent on getting vengeance because of the way he died, I mean, it's hard not to see why he would just come back like he does in the show, where he's just kind of like, "Oh, I guess I'm alive. I'm alive again, guys." It's like
the king in the north.
That was
although actually that does happen in the show. Jon does get vengeance. He lines up the people that stabbed him, hangs them, and then walks off, quitting the watch. Like, you don't have to go far from what happened to the show to what we're talking about. It's only a matter of degrees.
Exactly. And you could almost see if Dan and Dave got the bullet points from George, and George says Jon comes back to life, gets revenge on the Watchman who killed him, leaves the watch, hits those bullet points. In the show, that might look like hanging Ollie and the others, but in the books, and this is where our idea comes in the books, that could look different. That could be a very different kind of vengeance. So do you want to set the scene a little bit, Matt, for what the watch looks like after Jon's death?
Sure. It's largely well, there's a big difference between the Castle Black where Jon dies in the books versus the show, in that Selyse and the Queen's men are still there.
Yeah.
Stannis and his men have left long ago. So not only is there the faction made up mostly of stewards and builders that have stabbed Jon and betrayed him, but there's this other faction of people loyal to Stannis. And then there's also the Wildlings, who right before this declared their intention to march south with Jon, which basically kind of makes him their king or their leader. Like he just gained an army. Mm-hmm. So part of the problem is that, unlike in the show where the Tormund and the rest of them had to be summoned from their camp to go attack, they're already in Castle Black. They're like right down the hall. So for people like Bowen Marsh and Wick Whittlesticks and the other conspirators, they're probably going to have to run. They cannot hold up in Castle Black like Alistair Thorne did. And the same for Queen Selyse and her men, because the Wildlings are likely about to take over the castle. And you don't want to be there if you're Queen Selyse, who has done them no favors and has insulted them at every turn, and they know they don't like her. There's a good chance that in this mini civil war that's probably going to pop up after Jon's death, that Selyse and her men are not safe either. And where could they go? Where could they go, Michael?
Well, so it's interesting that you ask that, because Queen Selyse, she does arrive at Castle Black, but she's on her way to occupy the Nightfort. The Nightfort has been given by Jon to Stannis, which in and of itself is a whole thing, but we won't jump into that right now. And Queen Selyse is going to basically camp there while waiting for Stannis to take Winterfell. as part of this process, the Nightfort is in disrepair. It really hasn't been occupied in a long time. So Othel Yarwick, who is the chief builder of the Night's Watch, and his builders are sent by Jon to rebuild the Nightfort and restore it, and basically equip it for Queen Selyse to take her seat.
Do you want to read that quote, or do you want me to?
I can read that quote. It's down here.
Yep, I just highlighted it for you.
Thank you. Othel, says Jon, how goes the work at the Nightfort? I have had a letter from Sir Axel Florent, who styles himself the Queen's Hand. He tells me that Queen Selyse is not pleased with her quarters at Eastwatch by the Sea and wishes to move into her husband's new seat at once. Will that be possible? Yarwick shrugged. We've got most of the keep restored and put a roof back on the kitchens. She'd need food and furnishings and firewood, mind you, but it might serve. Not so many comforts as Eastwatch, to be sure, and a long way from the ships should her grace wish to leave us. But aye, she could live there, though it'll be years before the place looks like a proper castle. Sooner if I had more builders. And that's from Jon 8 in Dance.
So yeah, the Nightfort is livable at the moment, much more than when Bran came through in a storm of swords.
Mm-hmm.
They really have thrown. Othel Yarwick is the head of the builders. He's the chief builder. I'm not sure what his title is, but
First builder.
First builder. He sent his best men out to equip this thing, and Selyse, right after she gets to Castle Black, basically talks about the Nightfort nonstop. It's basically Val and Nightfort. That's basically all she talks about.
Yeah.
She really wants to go there, even though Jon does tell he relates this news to her that like Nightfort kind of sucks. It's like in ruin. Like you could probably survive a winter there, but it won't be fun. And she's like, it doesn't matter. That's my seat. That's where I should be. That's where my husband will rule from. So the other part of this that's important, not only is it in Selyse's best interest probably to flee to the Nightfort after Jon dies, but also Yarwick and his builders were aligning themselves in the arguments with Jon with Bowen Marsh. So it's very likely that the builders that are there are people that are loyal to Yarwick and therefore probably knew that Jon was going to die. So maybe they've been reinforcing it, because we have learned in the past that while the Night's Watch is kind of harmonious at the moment in their leadership, they have gone to war with each other, and particularly over the Nightfort.
Yes, there's a history of war and conflict with the Nightfort in particular. Although we've actually, just to throw this out there, recently in Fire and Blood, there has also been war between the Night's Watch when the Faith Militant were sent to the Watch. There was war between the Faith Militant guys, former Faith Militant guys who were up there, and the other guys, declaring their own kingdoms and things like that, but very much mirroring the historical stories of the Nightfort. Of course, the example of that is the Night's King, the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who ruled together at the Nightfort, which really is kind of the original story of the Nightfort being a dark, weird, scary place.
A very dark, weird, scary place. It really, it appears that the Night's King holding that as his home is probably the reason it's been the home of the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch for 5,000 years or however long it's been.
Mm-hmm.
It's likely in response to he took it as a rebel. So now it's being held. It was held until Queen Alysanne arrived and built them Deep Lake. It's likely, it's very likely in response to him, and that's the original story that informs, like you were saying, why it is such a awful, awful place. It's the place where in the North the worst thing possible happened, basically. So much so that there is no other character in A Song of Ice and Fire who has had their name stricken from the record. It is just the Night King.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. It's very much a center of abomination. I just also want to throw out here a real quick note that Othel Yarwick, who we've been talking about, when Jon makes his announcement about marching south to Winterfell, it's Othel Yarwick and Bowen Marsh who leave the hall with their men. it clearly is working with Bowen Marsh. So yeah, it absolutely makes sense that the Nightfort may well be a center for the conspirators, or a sort of fallback position for them.
They may have horses ready to go. They may have no intention of getting caught. They may just jump and run as fast as they can down the wall, beating the snow.
Which makes sense because, I mean, Bowen Marsh isn't suicidal. He's not stupid. They took advantage of a chaotic situation to remove Jon, but they know they're not going to get away with it necessarily. Not with wildlings and a giant and, Night's Watch who are loyal to Jon. They know that or at least you would assume, they know that it might go badly for them. They must have some sort of escape plan, some sort of fallback position, a bunker, whatever.
One that Yarwick has been restoring and knows inside and out at this point.
Exactly. And Yarwick's men are there. They're loyal to him. They're not, they're his faction, essentially.
We may find out in the Winds of Winter that not only are these guys gone with all their conspirators, they may also have, because Bowen Marsh is in charge of the stores, he may have stolen the money and a lot of the food too. They may have been, who knows, these guys are in charge of accounting for the Night's Watch, and Jon isn't that involved with it because honestly it's accounting, because who likes accounting? It's very likely that they have been getting ready for this for quite some time.
That's a great point. Yeah. Bowen has been tasked with collecting tolls from wildlings. He's supposed to be sending the riches to Eastwatch by the Sea.
Whoops.
But, again, why not have a cache of gold and jewels at the Nightfort just in case these mutineers need to escape and make their way maybe down to Cersei Lannister to ask for forgiveness or something, like if they have a backup plan here.
Or just go through the Black Gate. If Yarwick probably knows it's there at this point, if he's been restoring it.
The Black Gate is an interesting part of this equation, I think.
They can slip beyond the wall and maybe they could make a break somewhere, but they at least have a castle and an escape plan, which is probably why the Night's King chose that as his place. It's one of the most convenient ways to go back and forth between the north and the south of the wall.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've obviously talked about the contemporary situation of the Nightfort and the Night King a little bit, but there's a history at the Nightfort. I think it's fair to say, right?
A Lovecraftian history.
Yeah, a very spooky history. Should probably turn down the lights and get the camera real close to me.
Actually, let me see what happens if I do that.
What do you...
Shit.
That's good stuff.
So
that's actually really creepy. Oh my god.
That is really creepy. Oh, by the way, I have the new Omegang beer with me. The King in the North, a beer for Jon Snow and Imperial Stout. It's actually not that. I don't like stouts, but this is flavored pretty good. Kind of tastes like bourbon. It's great.
I'd be down. Yeah, sounds good.
The main one that we called out in the opening of the stream, if you missed it, is the story of Mad Axe.
Mad Axe.
Which is almost certainly referencing quite a lot of axe murderer history, but probably in particular The Shining and Jack Torrance with the descriptions of it. Here, let me grab the quotes real fast.
Yes. There's a lot of good quotes here. So
a lot of these come from the Bran of Storm of Swords chapter, Bran 4. Yeah, that's how you read that. That's how you read it. Those kind of things. They're told as Old Nan's scary stories, the ones that Bran says is his favorite, which, by the way, George is winking at the audience saying, these are my favorite stories too. George is originally a horror writer for the most part. He wrote a lot of horror before Song of Ice and Fire. It's a main component of most of his other stories. He really turned it down, and this is one of those examples where instead he turned it right back up. He went all the way. So let me just read this. But there might be other ghosts in the Nightfort, ones even more terrible. He remembered what old Nan had said of Mad Axe, how he took off his boots and prowled the castle halls barefoot in the dark, with never a sound to tell you where he was, except for the drops of blood that fell from his axe, and his elbows, and the end of his red, wet beard. Or maybe it wasn't Mad Axe at all. Maybe it was the thing that came in the night. The Prentice boys saw it all. The Prentice boys all saw it, old Nan said. But afterwards, when they told their Lord Commander, every description had been different, and 3 died within the year, and the 4th went mad. And 100 years later, when the thing had come again, the Prentice boys were seen shambling along behind it, all in chains. Whoa! And the other Maddox quote, which is another good one.
Yeah.
Maddox had been a big man in Old Nan's story, and the thing that come in the night had been monstrous. Back in Winterfell, Sansa told him the demons of the dark that couldn't touch him if he hid beneath his blanket. By the way, how like perfect is that?
That's so sweet.
That's a sweet thing Sansa told him.
Yeah.
He almost did that now before he remembered that he was a prince and almost a man grown. Brand, no, you're not. What are you talking about?
Almost a man grown at 8 or whatever. Yeah.
Hey, he's got a lot of pressures.
He does. You know, he's gone through more than I have, I would say. Yeah, Mad Axe. So Mad Axe, according to the stories, was he was a brother of the Night's Watch who murdered all of his fellow brothers with his big red beard. Not clear if it's red from the blood or if he just had a beard,
blood,
I guess. But yeah. And I mean, he must be pretty messy if his whole beard is bloody from like axe murdering. That's
like if you're going bed to bed chopping people, I mean, like there's got to be spray.
Yeah, that's right. Bed, axe, and beyond. Am I right?
But the story is a really terrible one. Essentially, he went room to room from the Nightfort, killing everyone he could find before he got caught, and then presumably killed himself. And his ghost still haunts the Nightfort itself.
Absolutely.
What it's really about, though, more than just the horror, is the idea of the Nightfort being a place where the Night's Watch have killed each other before, and in big numbers. That this is like a center of the conflicts, the wars between the castles. This is where all the bad stuff that from the Watch came from. Probably referencing the Night's King as well, with how he turned on the Watch itself, basically.
Yeah, it's I mean, we're going to talk about some of these other stories in a little more detail as well. But yeah, you're right. It is a place of conflict in the Watch. It's where brave Dany Flint was raped and murdered after it was revealed that she was a girl dressed as a boy. It is also, let's see, there was like a civil war in the Watch there between.
Yes, I think I pulled that.
The Nightfort. Yeah, you may have mentioned it already. This Nightfort and Snowgate.
Yes.
Only 300 years before Aegon's conquest.
Whoa.
Yeah. I don't know. It is. You're right. It's the center of Night's Watch conflict, of civil strife, of, since they're brothers, you might say, of kinslaying. You know, it's a place of abomination. It's definitely a center of abominations.
It's and especially the actual murder of each other. And if we're talking about, a lot of times these myths and legends that George includes have more predictive value than you would think, because a lot of times they're included so George is like workshopping ideas or putting it in your mind, so when it comes up later it becomes obvious, like the story of Florian the Fool, or the maiden and the bear and the maiden fair. A lot of those stories end up coming true as characters are aware of them. Like Dantos calls himself Florian quite a lot. The bear and the maiden fair comes true with Jaime and Brienne, just like directly, but it also is kind of like the story of Jorah and Dany and kind of what he's trying to do to her, which is gross and weird. Don't do that, Jorah.
Yes.
But for the example of Mad Axe, this is a extremely brutal tale about one member of the Night's Watch killing a whole bunch of others silently within the walls of the Nightfort. So if we're talking about Jon, who's probably going to be hellbent on vengeance, his enemies are fleeing to the Nightfort, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You already mentioned the thing that came in the night, because it's in the it's kind of in the Mad Axe quotes as well. But what's interesting is that the thing that came in the night is it's what Bran thinks Sam is.
Yeah.
When Sam bursts out of the well in the Nightfort, Bran is like, "Oh my God, it's the thing that came in the night." Specifically,
real spooked.
From the well came a wail, a piercing screech that went through him like a knife. A huge black shape heaved itself up into the darkness and lurched towards the moonlight, and the fear rose up in Bran so thick that before he could even think of drawing Hodor's sword the way he'd meant to, he found himself back on the floor again with Hodor roaring, Hodor, 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 the way he had in the lake tower whenever the lightning flashed. But the thing that came in the night was screaming too, and thrashing wildly in the folds of Mira's net. Which is, a nice bit of comedy, but that sort of speaks to the boogeyman qualities of the Nightfort's monsters, particularly this thing that came in the night, this thing that hunted people, and in death bound them to itself.
And it's the message of that story is a confusing one because it's sort of saying, don't stay up too late, or basically don't see things you're not supposed to, which with things like the Black Gate and the idea that the Night's Watch has probably been giving bastard children to the others for thousands of years at this point, it kind of makes sense that the story is basically for the youngsters to not try and find things that are hidden in the watch that they shouldn't too early. That there's a monster that will kill you for uncovering the truth of the Night's Watch.
That's crazy.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, right.
I like that.
Right. And I mean, of course, the chains in death speak to, the way the others control. Yeah, the way the others have chained their whites to them. So that's definitely and of course their armor looks like different things from different angles. So you've got the four boys describing it different ways. It all does kind of come back to this same sort of ice abomination.
But once again, this is really telling us that there are monsters in the Nightfort that are there to kill the brothers, like the Rat Cook, as well. That's a very Lovecraftian story that I didn't even realize when I first read it. There's a particular story where he talks about how there's rats in the walls and it leads to cannibalism down in these catacombs beneath it.
One of my favorite stories of his too. That's such
Do you
a good
remember
one.
the name of it?
Is the rats in the walls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that one's so creepy.
That was very creepy.
Oh my god. Yeah. And of course, according to the story of the Rat Cook, which, in case not everyone's familiar, he fed a king's son to the king.
King Sherrit.
No, this was King Tywell of the Rock.
Oh, I'm
King
sorry.
Sherritt's a different story.
Yeah.
But and according to the story anyway, the Rat Cook is an enormous white rat who still lives in the Nightfort today. And that all the other rats of the Nightfort are its descendants. So it is very much the rats in the walls, kind of this giant rat that, is a horrifying cannibal living in the deep places.
Thanks.
Living in the deep places of the watch. And we know in the Nightfort there are deep places. There are secret places. Like Molestown and Castle Black have huge tunnel systems beneath them as well. Mostly for like avoiding the winter, but like there's almost certain to be more than just the Black Gate beneath the Nightfort. There's probably going to be vaults and other crazy things that nobody's found yet that maybe Yarwick and his men have found.
Absolutely. There's a quote from another one from Bran 4. There were a lot of dark doors in the Nightfort and a lot of rats. Bran could hear them scurrying through the vaults and cellars and the maze of pitch black tunnels that connected them. Jojen wanted to go poking around down there, but Hodor said Hodor to that, and Bran said no. There were worse things than rats down in the dark beneath the Nightfort, which, yes. But also, that speaks to the tunnels and the sort of deep places. The worm ways, I believe, is what they're called, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which worms and rats have. We got a lot of worm stuff in Fire and Blood, but
yeah, we did.
Kind of a separate stream.
I think the most important thing about the story of the rats in the walls, it's an idea of legacy. The person that goes to the castle and restores it and finds the rats there, it's his ancestral home that has been abandoned for a long time. And that's a common theme in Lovecraft for a lot of these horror stories, where characters go to an ancestral home that's long been forgotten and suddenly tune into these weird, like, dreamscape horror ghost kind of things. And the Nightfort, for Jon, especially with the stories that the Night King was probably a Stark himself, it's almost, you can almost see it as like the summer hall of the Starks, where it's like where everything went wrong for them.
The Winter Hall.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. I like that. Summer Hall of the Starks at the Nightfort. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It's a destroyed castle. There's horror
Yeah.
stories all over the place. That's basically what we get from Summerhall, where it was just like the worst thing possible happened there. Same for the Starks.
Right. It's sort of a nexus of death. It's a gravity well in the magic scape. Well, so I think we've well established, as Gurm, that the Nightfort is just a center of spooky Night's Watch dying stories.
Well, there's one more that's a
Oh,
really
yeah.
cool one. Arson Ice Axe.
Oh this of course.
This is a fucked up one, and it's actually a wildling story. I don't think John knows it. I think it's told to him by Egret.
Oh, yeah. I think you
Maybe
might be
let me double
right.
check.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh no, John knew it as well. Okay, so but this is one
Okay.
that both sides of the wall know, which isn't always true. There are stories that only the wildlings know, and there are only stories that the Northerners know. But this one
Yeah.
has crossed over.
Mhm.
John knew the tale as well. Arson Ice Axe had been halfway through the wall when his tunnel was found by rangers from the Nightfort. Hey, the Nightfort again. By the way, this story is really about the brutality of the men who lived at the Nightfort. Like, these guys were not to be fucked with. They are terrible people. They did not disturb him at his digging, only sealed the way behind with ice and stone and snow. Dolores Ed used to say, if you pressed your ear flat to the wall, you could still hear Arson chipping away with his axe.
Yeah, which comes back to kind of the rats in the walls thing, doesn't it? This another similar Arson Ice Axe story is the 79 Sentinels who abandoned their post at the Nightfort. And went south, becoming outlaws. They were caught, returned to the wall, and then holes were cut in the wall, and the deserters were placed inside the holes, sealed up in the ice, much like Arson Ice Axe. I mean, what's interesting is you have both wildlings and Night's Watchmen sealed in the wall at the Nightfort. Which, I mean, that is a particular wrinkle that makes it all very interesting. I think that it's sort of these blood sacrifices to the wall, that they become sealed in the power of the wall.
Yeah, the Nightfort devours souls. Basically, it's like a maw. It eats everything that comes into it in like a very Lovecraftian way. But let's check in with Sanrixian. What do you got going on, Mallory? Oh boy, look at this picture. Ooh, hang on, let me present. There you go.
Oh man.
So, why don't you tell us what's going on here?
Well, I've got a Jon with a long claw. There's going to be blood trail back here, and then I'm trying to draw the runes of the Nightfort right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then back here we will have, if I can hit my buttons right. Sorry, guys.
It's okay.
That was the sound of the Nightfort. And then back here will be a shadow, which was Matt's idea, like an eldritch horror. Eldrick. Am I saying it right?
Michael would know.
Eldritch.
I said it right the first time. Yeah.
Yes.
Casting on the wall.
So this is about what we're about to get to. What
Yes.
What will Jon do when he gets there? This is such a cool picture. So this is inspired by The Shining, because this is me and Mallory's favorite movie. Imagine him as Jack Torrance, and you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm seeing the Jack Nicholson in it. I can see it.
Love it.
Jon Snokelson.
Jon Snokelson.
There we go.
Snokel nod.
Okay, that kind of makes him less scary, actually, if I think his name is Jon Snokelson.
Oh no, he's gonna be scary when Mallory gets done with him. She has ideas.
Yeah.
They're good ones. So one important thing that with Jon coming back is, what's he going to do with these deserters? And a big problem with the Nightfort thematically from like a storytelling perspective is that George has given us endless stories and foreshadowing and expectations that something terrible is going to happen there. And the only thing that's happened has been Sam came out of a well. Now that's a letdown.
Oh no!
Oh, it's the thing that came in night. Oh wait, it's a fat ranger. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. The most magical thing has been the Black Gate, but
that's not scary.
It's not scary. It's honestly sort of charming. It's like something out of Dragon Tales.
It's cool.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be cool. It's not the Nightfort. Nightfort's not cool.
Right. So yeah, there is very much some buildup here that has not yet paid off. And we have, again, setting the scene, a bunch of deserters who just killed their Lord Commander fleeing to the Nightfort, possibly billeting themselves there, holding up. And then we have a Lord Commander who is almost certainly going to come back from the dead, probably with help from Melisandre, but also by living in his ghost, in his wolf. That will sort of, when he comes back, he's going to be ferocious and angry and just ruthlessly focused on getting revenge for what they did to him.
And did to his sister, because they prevented him from going down.
Exactly. Yeah. They ruined the one chance to sort of save Arya Stark.
His favorite sibling, his favorite family member.
Absolutely, because he's in love with her, according to George's outline.
Yes, he is.
No.
Hey, they're just cousins. It's not as creepy as Targaryens and Lannisters.
Targaryens are different.
Jon's a Targaryen.
Yeah.
Arya's not.
Okay.
Anyway, we're getting off topic.
We're getting off topic. So what do we think is going to happen is, I don't think it's going to be like straight up Mad Axe where it's Jon taking off his shoes and slipping around and just like stabbing people with long claws. They sit because they're going to post guards. They know that Jon's going to be coming for them, probably with the Wildling army and some loyal rangers. But I think it's almost certain that every one of these deserters is going to happen to them what happened in the show, but in a much more gruesome Lovecraftian Stephen King way, where he like Starks chop off heads. Like, what if he chops off all their heads and brings them back to Castle Black and mounts them?
Yeah, totally, exactly. And I mean, yeah, that's the basic idea, right? Is that Jon is going to go to the Nightfort and just exact vengeance by going up and down the halls, executing these people who wronged him. But sort of what I think is going to make it really fun and interesting is the point of view for this.
Oh, interesting. I didn't thought about this. Okay.
Yeah, so I've been trying to think about this because I wanted to, I don't know. Yeah. So George R. R. Martin has said he's not going to add any new point of views, so it's doubtful we're going to get like a Bowen Marsh point of view as he's stalked through the Nightfort by vengeful revenant Jon. But and I do believe that we will get Jon point of views again at some point. However, we know he's writing more. He will have more Melisandre chapters in The Winds of Winter. So my sort of the way I could see this playing out is Melisandre following Jon to the Nightfort and through the Nightfort, seeing like what he has done, and like in the distance hearing screams and maybe even hearing the dripping of blood from his sword. And so Melisandre kind of almost as like a Dr. Frankenstein, as Dr. Frankenstein's monster wanders the halls of the Nightfort, just wreaking vengeance on all these treasonous bastards.
Interesting.
Hashtag they deserve it.
Well, they do have it coming. That's a really interesting idea, because I think you're exactly right that even if Jon does have POV chapters again, this is not what you want his POV for, because it works so much better externally.
Well, yeah, and you
from a horror writer.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because in any horror movie, you don't want to show the monster in full cut, like in an open field, unless that's the point of the movie or whatever. But like we talked about Paranormal Activity at the beginning, you don't see the monster; you just see the effects it has.
Matt, I was just gonna say, Matt mentioned that Silence of the Lambs was one of your favorite films.
Yes.
And that also has one of the most terrifying moments where they don't show you the picture of what it looked like after he bit the nurse's ear off, after Hannibal bit the nurse's ear off and her face off or something. And that was way, way, way more terrifying.
Yes.
So that backs you up, Michael. That's what I was trying to do.
No,
Also,
I like that.
Also the scene where you only see Hannibal attack the prison guard when he escapes.
Uh-huh.
But you don't see him flay him. You don't see him essentially turn his back into wings and all that stuff. You only see a character coming in and then witnessing and going, "Oh my God."
Right.
Yeah.
Classic horror stuff. That stuff's way scarier than gore.
Yeah.
And a John POV of this would just be gore. Although it would be, I would want to see his POV afterwards to see what he thinks about what he just did.
Totally. Yeah. But I think it has precedent in dance because it's Mel's chapter where we get Jon realizing that Mance Rayder is alive and sending Mance Rayder to Winterfell, which is arguably one of the worst things he does in the book because it's the thing that ends up coming back to bite him in the ass to, like, oh, now the Boltons hate the Night's Watch. They're going to come kill us all. And it's from Melisandre's perspective. It's her watching Jon being faced with this choice and choosing something bad. So, that the point of view thing, we don't necessarily have to have that settled, but I like the idea that it wouldn't be Jon, that it would be someone else seeing the aftermath, seeing it off screen slightly. And then maybe at the end of the chapter, she comes in and Jon has like bitten Bowen Marsh's throat out and is like, oh, hey, what's up?
Oh, interesting. Cannibalism. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
Actually, yeah. I mean, I was just making that up, but actually, yeah, that would kind of fit.
If ghosts started coming through, because the direwolves do eat human flesh.
They do. And that's Bran has partaken of human flesh both as a wolf and as a human. But yeah.
It really works well in his arc too, because as Aemon tells him, I don't think it's the exact same line in the book. It might be where it's basically kill the boy and let the Lord Commander or let the man be born, where we've been seeing Jon go down the path from being Jon Snow to being Lord Snow, commander of the Night's Watch, being Lord Stark, the way that Ned's it's described that he can put that face on. But we haven't seen the moment where it really breaks for him. He's really just been struggling and trying to play politics and get everyone to play along. And in a real way, in the rage that he feels, like you talked earlier about when he almost killed Iron Emmett because he got really angry. Like, what did he get really angry about?
It was that he was remembering how Robb told him he would never be the Lord of Winterfell. This morning, what was it? He's thinking back to fighting with Robb, and they're each calling out to be their heroes. Oh, I'm Prince Aemon. I'm Florian the Fool. And that morning, Jon called it first. I'm Lord of Winterfell, he cried, as he had 100 times before. Only this time, Robb had answered, you can't be Lord of Winterfell. You're bastard born. My lady mother says you can't ever be the Lord of Winterfell. I thought I had forgotten that. Jon could taste blood in his mouth from the blow he'd taken. In the end, Halder and Horse, and so it cuts ahead to Jon having just absolutely beat the shit out of Iron Emmett.
Who's also a very good swordsman.
Yeah, Iron Emmett is no joke. Yeah. And it says Iron Emmett, his shield is half in splinters. The visor of his helm is knocked askew. His sword is 6 yards away. And he was shouting yield because he says, was there some part of yield you could not comprehend, Lord Snow?
Even then, the Lord Snow call out.
Yeah. And of course, there's this really interesting, I hadn't thought of the cannibalism thing until right now, but now I'm seeing it everywhere. I thought I had forgotten that. Jon thinks Jon could taste blood in his mouth from the blow he'd taken. So Jon thinks of how he can't be Lord of Winterfell because he's a bastard. He tastes blood in his mouth, and then he just unleashes on the nearest poor person who happens to be in his way, basically. Yeah, so
this could really be the turning point for Jon in a dramatic way. Like, I think a lot of people have the idea that it will just be the resurrection that changes him. But like when Stoneheart comes back, she has murderous intent and she's very angry. But it's when she starts hanging people. It's when she starts killing innocent Freys who had nothing to do with the Red Wedding. That's when she stops being Catelyn Stark, and that's when she becomes Mother Merciless. That's when she really becomes the monster of the Riverlands. And I think an important part of these stories that we were talking about, these legends, is a lot of them have the identity stripped away from them. they're just sort of like their titles or like what happened to them. Imagine the story of a Lord Commander going to the Nightfort and killing all of his men like 1,000 years later.
Yeah. That's it is literally the stuff legends are made of.
An undead Lord Commander.
Which I think is exactly what is happening in Aswaf, is the stuff that legends are made of. You know, that the idea is being that 1,000 years from now, all of this could be retold as distantly and as fantastically as the Age of Heroes. But that obviously these are real people living through these fantastic events.
Right. And Jon may go down as a monster in history for what he does, but we have the perspective of seeing why he's so angry at the men that fled to the Nightfort, most likely. That what he's done to them is probably justified. But depending on, I mean, the idea of who holds the pen is overblown in history, but in terms of a fantasy world, it does matter that Jon is kinslaying, that he's killing his own men, that he's, I mean, maybe they will call him a cannibal, especially if, as we talk about when he comes back and he's more ghost-like, maybe he'll become like a warg king kind of figure.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The old gods are associated so much with that kind of that cannibalism and that consumption of human flesh. Like that's a big part of it. There's also, oh hell, I'm losing my train of thought. Nope, never mind. Go ahead. Lost it completely. It'll come to me as soon as you start talking.
I was going to check in with Mallory again because it looks like she's made some big progress on her painting.
Oh, I'm just lighting.
Ooh.
Oh, here we go.
So the interesting part here that I wanted you to notice, Michael, is the color of his hair.
Yeah, he's gone a bit Super Saiyan, hasn't he?
Well, that's how I feel.
So
I feel
this
like
is
the white hair is almost like a loss, especially with what we see in the Ghost and Winterfell chapters and Theon.
Oh yeah.
And plus with him being part merged with Ghost Soul, I just think it would visually be super neat. I'm not like, oh my god, this is the way it has to be, but I think it would be great.
Yes,
Mel's influence, but
yeah, we're talking about Elric of Melniboné is where that came from.
Yes,
where he starts to look more like Bloodraven as his character goes along.
Correct.
Well, yeah, but and I mean, the white hair, red eyes aesthetic is the Weirwoods and Ghost, and it's the very strong archetype that I could see it happening, especially given that Jon is a Targaryen. I mean, there's sort of a practical level to the whitening of the hair.
And just like been reading through Fire and Blood and stuff, and the way that George uses black is almost interchangeable with indigo and deep colors. So, I mean, in Jon's eyes, a lot of the times are described as gray, but if you think about the lighting and the situation he's in, he's usually in low muted lighting or out in the snow, which is often diffused lighting. So there very well could be some purple in those eyes.
That's a good point.
And it's something that we kind of skipped over a little bit, but a large part of Ghost's descriptions as a character and the way that Jon thinks about Ghost is not, he thinks about his burning red eyes and he thinks about his white as snow fur and how much he looks like a weirwood. And I don't think it's out of the question that when Jon comes back that maybe he takes on some of those traits in some weird magical way, because this is an essay I've written before, but it will probably be a video in the future, where the dire wolves are much more than just regular dire wolves. They seem to have almost powers of their own. Ghost intelligence is almost human-like from if you do a close reading back. So if there's a merging of their two souls, and particularly maybe if Ghost dies in order to get Jon back out, I would not be surprised if Jon takes on his redder eyes, or if his hair starts turning white like Theon.
Something to basically establish or further connect their bond as Greenseer or their warg bond, rather. Sorry.
Yep. Michael, you got something? You got
sorry. I've been enthralled by the chat as people
Oh.
are pointing out other white hair, red eyes. Bernie points out this happens in Twin Peaks.
Nice.
To the to somebody, not to spoil it. Their hair turns white after they go through a traumatic event. And Jojo, Jojo Lady Dane in the chat has posted a Bible quote, which is very relevant. There's this about the resurrected Christ. His hairs were white as wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire. That's the King James version of Revelation. Yeah, I mean, that's I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I knew you even liked Christianity.
You
paid attention during Bible study. I did not.
Yeah,
I think that's an excellent quote. I think it's exactly what we're talking about. Like, George may make up a reason for it to happen, but I think it's very telling. Just like really go back and look at Ghost's appearances to Jon and how often the eyes in the white snow, in the white fur, and how they relate to the Weirwoods and back and forth, and how he thinks of that as the Weirwoods as his family, as Ned. And I really would not be surprised if George has a way of making that happen, even if it doesn't in the show, because to be fair, they're not big on changing eye color. Like, they tried to do it with Dany early on and just said, no, these contacts aren't working.
Also,
go ahead.
If you think about it, like, damn it, I lost it. I'm sorry, Matt. I had a thought, and then we started talking about contacts. Jon, color,
white hair.
Oh, okay. Bloodraven. Bloodraven has a lot of white and red and black symbolism. So, like, that's like both Targaryen and like connected to the WereNet and whatnot. I think there's definitely something there. Does that make sense? Sorry.
That does make sense. Yeah. Now, there was a request very early on in the chat for me for a little bit of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn talk.
Go for it.
So I will, of course, oblige, because how can I not?
Gray's not here.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I need to, anyway. One idea that I had written about a little bit in Return of the White Wolf, and that I think is kind of relevant here to Jon's personality, is this idea of magical entropy. That when there are unnatural magical things, they're by bending the natural order wants to return to being unbent. And so they degrade, or strange things happen around them. In the series, there are three titular swords, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. They're magical, created out of impossible materials, and being these contradictions are they bend things, they become undone. And so I think that's something also that's going on with undeath, this sort of entropy idea, that you lose yourself in magic. It takes away from you, it removes from you. And obviously we talked about that with, living on a second life in an animal, you slowly disappear, the entropy kind of absorbs you. But I think it's important to note that, like, Ghost won't just be sort of a soul jar for Jon. He won't be preserved without being changed. What law of thermodynamics is that, right? Where
entropy?
Yeah, where
matter cannot be destroyed, or is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, maybe I'm not good at physics, but the idea just being that, like, Jon can't go in and out of Ghost without bleeding some of himself, I guess. And I think that's really what a lot of this comes down to, is that the experience will change him, unlike in the show.
It's that's not necessarily thermodynamics. That's just sort of it's called the observer effect, where you can't, anything you look at is changed because you looked at it, and it's a big problem with looking at
quantum physics.
Yeah, quantum physics. But it applies to the macro scale too. You are part of the system. You are not outside of it. So by going into Ghost, he will change, and George has explicitly told us that will happen. Second lives do change people.
Yes, because playing Second Life is an addiction.
Don't play it.
I remembered my thought from earlier, and then we should take a few
Okay, yeah, go for it.
viewer questions. But coming back to the show, which is something we talked about at the beginning, with the way the executions in the show kind of are a mirror for this.
Mhm.
In the show, the sort of catharsis of Jon getting his comeuppance on the people who killed him is undercut by him executing Ollie, who is a boy. And yes, most of the audience hated Ollie, but objectively, hanging a child under the age of 14 is, that's a massively messed up thing to do. And in that, we get some of that kind of moral ambiguity in Jon's vengeance. And I think that's kind of a shorthand for what we're talking about here on a larger scale. That moral ambiguity when Jon gets his cathartic vengeance. We're going to be rooting for him. We're going to be like, oh, yeah, come on, knock Bowen Marsh out of the park. But there will be something that sours the wine a little bit, in the same way that the Red Wedding 2.0 theory, it's not just going to be vengeance on the Lannisters, it'll be vengeance on the innocents. And I think that's something we'll see a lot in the Winds of Winter in general, is whether it's the Martells or Dany or the example I already mentioned with the Red Wedding 2.0, people getting their sort of righteous comeuppance, like the Manderleys even, it's not just going to be a good thing. It's going to feel horrifying in some ways. And the show did that shorthand with Ollie, executing Ollie, but it makes sense to have it happen at the Nightfort with Jon becoming a monster out of legend, even as he gets revenge on behalf of the audience, as he does the thing the audience wants him to.
What you're talking about is very likely to be Selyse and her men, who really had nothing to do with this. And I doubt Jon will control himself. He hates Selyse anyway. He doesn't like the Queen's men.
That's
especially if they take Val. If they take Val with them.
So actually, that's now see, I do hold to the idea that Stannis will burn Shireen at Winterfell, but here's a fun way to set that up. Jon goes to the Nightfort, slaughters his way through the deserters, and most of the Queen's men. Selyse and company flee to Selyse and Shireen maybe flee to Winterfell, and they tell Stannis, they're like, Jon went crazy. Jon is murdering people. We can't trust him anymore. It's just us against the others. At which point Stannis might go, well, looks like I'm the last bastion for mankind. Better burn my daughter. But
BBBD.
Better burn my daughter. But a way to sort of push a wedge between Stannis and Jon.
Interesting idea.
Yeah.
The innocent that may be killed may actually be Val too. Where Jon doesn't know how to react around her, but she's a very challenging person. She puts it to Jon a lot of their interactions to like grow up and become Lord Commander and become like king in these sort of ways. And if he's not controlling his impulses, I don't know what's going to happen if she tries to do that thinking it's just him. If it's not Jon / Ghost / the monster of the Nightfort.
If Val is there, she will have the baby with her.
Yeah, that too.
She will have the child. Not to get this super dark here, but
it should be dark. That's what we've been talking about this whole time. What happens with Jon and the Nightfort should not just be, and like you were talking about, it shouldn't just be catharsis. It should terrify us as readers to think that this is the person that we've been reading. How did he get this way? And sort of not trusting him going forward, and just being like, a lot of people dread reading Jon's chapters because they're kind of boring. But what if you dread them because now you're inside the mind of like an insane murderer? What if you're inside the mind of like Maegor now, basically?
Right. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned Maegor, because that's kind of what I was thinking of when we were talking about point of view. That in Fire and Blood, Maegor's chapter kind of gets, or his section kind of gets relentless, because it's all so samey with him just doing gory thing after another, which is exactly the problem. If it's just a point of view of Jon walking from room to room, like executing people, and why it should be a different point of view. But yeah, Maegor, I think, is the right comparison, especially since we know he's a Targaryen and he may face that kind of self-reflection the same way Dany does um, when he finds out. Yeah. By the way, I just want to toot my own horn a little bit.
Oh.
The undercutting catharsis thing is the final paragraph of Return of the White Wolf. So if y'all haven't read that yet, you really should.
You should read it. It's really good. It's a thing that convinced me how Jon will be coming back, and that it will be awful. Like it's like when the ghost of High Heart dreams of Catelyn coming back, and she said she woke up and screamed.
Yes, yeah.
It should be like that, based on what we're being told about the Nightfort and Jon's bloodlust and his anger issues, and these people that like can be punished for everything that's happened to him in his life.
And Ghost and the wolfness of the wolf blood in him, awakening.
Could you drop the link to your thing in the chat?
I will, although I think
you're a mod. I think you can do it.
Yeah, I can. Steven Stark had posted it further up, but there it is. There is the link. And we talked about that at the top of the hour a little bit, but I didn't go into detail. So all the details behind what I'm saying are in there. Now we do have a few questions in the doc. Do you want to start?
One thing I wanted to do before that is if just because this is a theory that we came up with before Fire and Blood, and Fire and Blood actually added to it. The Alicane quote. Do you want to pop open your book and read it?
In my best Alicane in the Membrane voice here.
It's this. Now we know from the history that Alicane paid for Deep Lake to be the new seat of the Lord Commander in the Night's Watch, because she didn't like, for some reason, the Nightfort, and she offered to pay for it, but nobody really knew why. It was just kind of like this awkward detail. And why did it go from Deep Lake to Castle Black? This passage actually gives us the reason. Go ahead.
Yes. So the background is, of course, that Alicane is at the Wall. She's making her sort of northern progress, her tour of the Night's Watch, and she reaches the Nightfort and goes to visit it, riding from Snowgate to Nightfort. And in her chronicles, she writes, "It is so huge, the men seem dwarfed by it, like mice in a ruined hall," she told Jaehaerys. "And there is a darkness there, a taste in the air. I was so glad to leave that place." And now, she later goes on. I'm not going to keep doing that voice. She later goes on to meet with Lord Commander Burleigh and
Burrell. Isn't it Burrell? Is it Burrell or is it Burleigh?
This is Lord Burleigh.
Okay, sorry. I was very excited because it was a crab.
Oh my god.
No, he's a Burleigh. I don't even know if we have House Burleigh much before that. But anyway, the Nightfort is crumbling over large and surely ruinous to heat, and the Watch should abandon it, she said, and build a smaller castle further to the east. And when he says that they lack the coin to build new castles, Alicane pays for the castle herself with her own jewelry. "I have a good many jewels," she says. And there's a statue of Alicane outside the new castle, Deep Lake.
So they did build it.
And Snowgate was actually renamed Queen's Gate in her honor as well. So, I mean, she... Oh, excuse me, I hit the mic there. She basically was so affected by the Nightfort, by visiting the Nightfort.
Just visiting.
Yeah, just popping in, just popping by, that she...
Is that
like,
Monty Python?
It sounds like it.
It's kind of Python-esque, I guess. I don't know.
It's like you're doing the scene with Sir Lancelot and the damsel in distress who's not a damsel. That you're doing him.
I think that might be where it's coming. The deep place in my mind where that's the well that is crawling out of. Yeah. But yeah, she's so affected by the horrors of the Nightfort that she stakes her earrings on building a better castle. She's like, hold up, let me just build a better castle. Like, she's so affected.
And it's not like she visited it when Bran did. And Bran visited it when it was abandoned and spooky and run down. This is when the Nightfort was still occupied. This is when there were people there to make her feel better about it. And she even... There's a weird quote from right before that where essentially she was riding on top of the wall and she felt like the wind was trying to knock her off. And then she goes to the Nightfort and feels incredibly unwelcome, spooked, creeped out, whatever you want to say. She needs to get out of there instantly. It's almost like as a Targaryen queen and her dragon got closer to the Nightfort, the more it wanted her to leave. Like if you're thinking about it in terms of The Shining, it's like the Overlook is reacting to her showing up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and we know that probably there is a sentience beneath the Nightfort in the Black Gate. That thing can talk.
Yes.
So when people talk about it being spooky and scary, it might not, it may go more than just Jon being crazy with vengeance when he descends upon the conspirators. Like the Weirwood and the castle itself may be pushing him in a way that we see the Overlook push Jack Torrance.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And even this is pulling from the book version of The Shining, but the hedge animals in the book version that, come to life and terrorize them. That's not too different from the idea of the Weirwood being this sort of nexus of vegetable power, being this
Or like
natural
souls.
Yeah. Vegetable power. Now we talked about the Nightfort and its sort of history a little bit just in this past minute. So I kind of want to jump to these questions.
Let's go. Let's get to, oh, by the way, chat, if you have questions, now is Q&A time. Start putting them in there.
Hell yeah. Yeah, we'll probably wrap up fairly soon. So you got to throw your questions in now or forever hold your peace. So this was from way earlier in the chat from Jojo Lady Dane. And the paraphrasing of what they were asking is it possible the Nightfort predates the Wall? It is the only fort whose stairs aren't part of the original construction. And I will also add to this that we know it's the first castle. It predates Castle Black. It is the oldest castle on the Wall and the largest. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think it's definitely, I think it's very possible. Like I said that offhandedly where it's like the Stark Summer Hall, but we know that Winterfell probably came after the Wall, or it started from very humble beginnings, like maybe one tower, the first tower. Like the Nightfort may be like the Stark ancestral home, long abandoned and given over to the Watch, maybe as payment for what their ancestor did.
Now that's an interesting idea. Yeah, because we do know that Winterfell was built, according to legend, after the Long Night ended, which would also be around the time the Wall was raised. So we can assume that Winterfell was either built at the same time as the Nightfort or after the Nightfort. Or like just before by like a year or whatever, either contemporaneously or the Nightfort was built first. Yeah, it's interesting because the positioning of the Nightfort, it's pretty close to the center of the Wall, isn't it? I believe. Yeah.
It's to the west of Castle Black, but still more or less in the center if you take the gorge into account as part of the Wall, basically.
Okay, yeah, sure. Which I don't know. It's interesting because that either means to me that the Wall was built with the Nightfort at its center. That the Wall was built and then the Nightfort was built to be the command post right at the center of the Wall, or that the Nightfort was there and the Wall went out from both sides of the Nightfort.
Especially because there's the detail that the Nightfort is the only castle that has stairs carved out of ice to get up to the top of it. Benjen said they stopped doing it because it's such a bad idea that people slip all the time. But for some reason, for the rest of the castles, they were able to get their shit together enough to build real stairs. The Nightfort, they never did. I think the stairs are still there, the ice stairs, which implies that when it was built, it wasn't built into the Wall. They did that afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, those ice stairs are not OSHA certified. But the other interesting wrinkle in this, I guess, is the Black Gate itself, because that relies on the vows of the Watch, which obviously come about after the Long Night. So, I mean, the gate could have been added later. I don't know. I like the idea that it's older, though, that it really is truly ancient. The Maesters believe that only the deep stone vaults are part of the Nightfort, are the original construction. That it's been rebuilt so many times.
Stone vaults, kind of like a crypt, huh? Under
Like a
Winterfell?
crypt. Yeah. What if the actual kings of winter are buried at the Nightfort?
Yeah, this is like great Empire of the Dawn stuff where you can it's very possible that there was ancient advanced civilizations there, much like the Great Empire of the Dawn in Westeros long beforehand, or like colonists from there, or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, even, you could compare those deep stone vaults to the mazes of Lorath,
Sure.
where the maze makers, built their subterranean tunnels. Yeah. So I guess I would say, if to answer the question, I like the idea that it predates the wall. I expect we'll get more clarification on whether it does or not. I think this is a question that'll be answered. Yeah.
There's a bunch of questions in the row from the chat from R. DeWraith and Darklight and Ned Braden, where they're kind of asking sort of the same question.
Oh,
Do you
yeah, I
think
see.
the Nightfort is the home of the others, basically?
Right.
Which,
That it. Yeah.
if the others are related to the Starks as they seem to be, I would say yes.
Yeah.
Maybe they had to give up the
yeah.
Nightfort and go north.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can see a narrative here where you have the proto Starks based out of the Nightfort, who are like ice sorcerers, or like dark wizards basically. And then the others are one branch of that evil sorcery, and our modern Stark family is kind of the other branch of that, that comes from the Nightfort. Like, that the Nightfort may have been this one. I'm trying to get my fucking camera to zoom out here. Oh no, it's just following me. This stupid camera. I'm never doing this again. That the Nightfort, is at the center. And then you have the others that split off and go north, and the Starks that split off and go south. I could see that historical narrative.
Sure. It's like the idea of the Numeronians and the Black Numeronians. Same idea.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Right. That's an interesting one. Yeah.
Let's check in with Mallory real quick, because she has made some
Yeah.
real progress here. Whoa. Look at this, you guys.
It got bloody.
Maximizing my screen here. Oh,
holy hell. This is so cool.
Oh, I love the wolf shadow. That's so cool.
Well,
And yeah, the buildings of the Nightfort. Someone was saying in chat, I feel like we don't I don't get to see you do like buildings and stuff very often. So this is cool.
Yeah, I don't get to do a lot of buildings, but this is kind of rubbly buildings.
I asked quite a lot for this one, and she delivered.
No kidding.
I always deliver. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's true.
It's true.
Except for a couple times.
Yeah, that's okay, because that one turned out pretty good.
I always deliver except for a couple times.
I'll make sure with the shadow on the wall, make sure you give that red eyes too, or like maybe not like as red, but like like a hint of it.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Yes, sir, my lord. yes, my lord.
I'm Lord Snowing this one. Okay, so let's go back to some questions. I'm gonna take one from the. Do you want to go from the chat, or you want to go from the doc?
We can go from the doc and then back to the chat.
Okay. So from Stone Dancer, what if Mad Axe was skin changed? Well, we talked about this late in the stream, but the idea of weirwoods and skin changing and green seers at the Nightfort should not be discounted. What they're talking about is really the spooky kind of things that you get from Theon when he thinks Bran is following him around Winterfell, where he thinks it's haunted with his ghost, when we know it's Bran just sitting in a tree north of the wall messing with him, trying to get him to do something. But Bran's not malevolent towards Theon. What if somebody was malevolent towards the Night's Watch?
Yeah, well, sure. What if there was a sort of a warg king of the wildlings who was able to somehow, I don't know, inception himself into this dude's brain and turn him into a butcher wandering the halls.
Sure. Actually, the red hair kind of links to that too, with the idea that like the red hair is lucky, or it's kissed by fire, and maybe it's like kissed by a fire of the gods kind of thing. Maybe that's the reason the detail beyond the blood got put in there, to like like some sort of weird ancient way of being like maybe redheads were normally skin changers or something like that.
Yeah, there is something interesting there with Kissed by Fire, I think, that George is doing. Even if it's just a play on words, it's still
I mean,
he's drawing lines.
He just does like redheads, so it doesn't have to mean anything, but it could. It could.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's go back to the chat. Where did I leave off? Question from Lady Shar.
Uh-huh.
Hi, Lady Shar.
What do you think of the idea that the Nightfort was the original base of operation for the last hero?
Yeah.
Ooh.
4K, no. I mean, like I said, I can put that narrative together. Yeah, that would totally seem right. Again, as sort of a base for wizards, right? As a seat for sorcerers.
Storm of sorcerers.
A storm of sorcerers. Yeah, I think that could work. The only reason not for that to not be true is the idea that the last hero was like a wandering hero kind of person. As opposed to maybe a member of a house or someone based out of a castle, that they were more of sort of a hedge knight. But that's something you can't confirm or deny that.
It's so far in the past that what the last hero is probably changes from person to from house to house.
Sure.
Because they all want a piece of it.
From region to region.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah.
I mean, just in like a modern sense, is like the idea of white Jesus, that like he looks like Obi-Wan from the prequels, where it's like dude's from the Middle East.
Hello there.
He's not a European, but gets depicted that way. Same sort of thing should happen for the last hero in Azor Ahai.
Yeah, sure, right.
I mean, just think of all the different names that you have: Eldritch Shadow Chaser and the last hero and whatnot. I can't think of any of them. Harkoon hero.
Yeah,
Harkoon's just the name of a city too, so they just basically named it after themselves.
Let him have his things. All right.
I'm down with that. Yeah, there should be more places. That's very straightforward. I like it.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
We got a donation from JoJo. Thank you very much. No question. She was just thanking us for taking hers.
Yeah.
You're welcome. That was a good question, JoJo. I really enjoyed that one.
Eliana is in the chat.
Eliana.
And
Eliana.
What up, Eliana? What's up, Aegon?
Senya and Rainey's here.
Yeah. And she is saying, oh, that's a good question too. Ned Braden in the chat, who says, do you think there's a reason that none of the houses claim to be descendants of the last hero?
It's probably because he's the Night King and he got wiped from history. Now
there's an interesting idea. I mean, this is a good observation, though, that it's not like you have the Umbers going around going, yes, ours is the blood of the last hero, and the Starks are going, no, ours is the blood of the last. Like, no one really plugs into that story.
But they do in the negative, where people get blamed for being the Night King.
I guess that's true. Yeah. No one really. Yeah. I mean,
it tells you the same person.
Yeah, and so much of that just comes back to like old Nan's stories, unfortunately.
Which are 100% right. Nan is always right.
Yeah, I mean, she's our one source. So like, yeah. Yeah, but that is an interesting question. I agree. I think there's a chance it's because the last hero is the Night's King, or is Brandon the Builder, or like is another historical figure.
Sure.
And has become separated from that historical figure.
There's also an important point to make out about the last hero and the Night King, if they are the same person, is that we sort of think as the defense of humanity against the others being all against them. But even in the time of the Andals and the First Men fighting, there were people who were friendly. There are probably people who sympathize with the others, especially if they came from humans to begin with. So I would not be surprised if there were houses in the north who were allied with the others, like secretly or otherwise, maybe with the promise that they will become undead ice demons too, with an infinite power. I mean, that's a pretty good offer, especially if you're morally bankrupt like the Boltons or some of the other houses.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing why they could be the same person but seen different ways. That could be the different perspectives, where it's the last hero for the people that were opposing the others, but the Night King for the people that were allied with them, or at least in principle. It's a cool. I think Eliana calls it a monomyth kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's the term
That's
where
exactly
it's yeah. I think Joseph Campbell might have dibs on the monomyth thing, but Eliana might have too. Yeah,
No, it's
Eliana
Eliana.
came up with it.
Just
Mhm.
her.
So to take a completely different tack, we got a question here from Anime Lover. Will Val kill or burn alive Shireen at the Nightfort? Now that is a suggestion I have not seen before.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
It would make sense because
Why would Val do it?
Well, she doesn't she like immediately be like that child is evil.
she does.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, like she
Yeah.
does not like Shireen at all. Like,
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting theory.
Yeah, for the grayscale, she says she's going to infect and kill us all, right?
She does think, and if she ends up being stuck in the Nightfort with, this cursed child,
She's gonna freak.
she is gonna freak.
She's
The
not-
only reason I don't think it would happen is because I think Stannis has to be the one to do it, but
Probably.
I don't disagree with the idea that could be a serious source of conflict. If Val is swept up with the Queen's men as they flee to the Nightfort,
It's Sir Patrick, right, that wants her, right?
Yeah, although he Sir Patrick is no more.
Oh, that's right. He got definitely killed by the giant of 1-1.
Joined the bleeding choir invisible, I believe.
Aw.
Or in an NFL sense, it is Phil Simms destroying the Cowboys. By the way, if you didn't know that, that's one of my favorite references in A Song of Ice and Fire.
That's right.
Sir Patrick of King's Mountain is a reference to George's friend who's a Cowboys fan. So George had his giant 1-1, 11, Phil Simms, kill his cowboy-loving friend.
Yeah, because Sir Patrick's sigil is the Cowboys logo, and Patrick of King's Mountain, his friend is Patrick from Montreal. Montreal means King's Mountain in French.
That's amazing.
Oh, George.
But it's amazing. That's one of the things I love when we were talking about the myths and legends, how they probably are like that, references to something weird or something like Stephen King or something like that, but he uses them productively. 1-1 and Sir Patrick's of King's Mountain are important to the plot line.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Just like Sir Clayton Suggs, who is a reference to Terrell Suggs, I believe.
Probably
another football player who plays for the accursed Ravens.
The accursed Ravens.
Oh, because Beefish likes the Ravens.
Let's see if we have any other.
Steelers fan.
Let's grab some more questions here.
Yeah, we can probably do a couple more questions and then we got to wrap it up.
This is my stream, Michael.
Well, you know what? I'm the dancing queen, and I decide.
Young and sweet, only 17.
How old was Rhaenys?
Not that old.
Oh yeah, she was wee.
By the way, while you're looking for a question, everyone who reads Fire and Blood, just add like 5 years to all the ages in the book, because I really don't think George understands children.
No.
It's very upsetting, a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it? It was Jaehaerys and Alysanne were 13?
Yeah. And they were 14 when they consummated their marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right before the passage that he underlines and bolds and italics, and it says Targaryens are different. And I'm like, George, calm down.
Yeah, no, they're not that different.
They're unless they are literally dragons.
Yeah. Anyway, Joe, you made a noise. So
I was reading Eliana's comment. That happens a lot when I read her comments. I go,
woo! Yeah.
She was talking about how the fact that it's sort of implied at the end of the last hero story that he dies and he doesn't have any offspring.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah, and that's why no houses claim his ancestry. Yeah. I think that would make a lot of sense. Especially, I know that's an idea Eliana likes with the tragic Shakespearean protagonist. So, yeah, I could see that.
Let's see here. A question from Brenda Starr. Are the children of the forest involved in the evil going on at the Nightfort? An excellent question.
I love it.
I would say almost certainly. Because the way the Nightfort is described is it's described as almost like a well of souls, where the things and the evil that happens there stays there, which is a hallmark of the Children of the Forest, where their abilities with the weirwoods to stick around and their second lives is basically, as a species, they beat death, like in large part. That's sort of their whole thing. It's that death does not lay a finger on them. So if the Nightfort is truly haunted, as it seems to be, and there's a lot of weird monsters and like people doing insane things, then it would make perfect sense that the Children of the Forest are involved, as those are their things.
So, interestingly enough, I am going to 100% disagree.
Wow. Okay.
Because I think the Nightfort is it's a human corruption of magic. I think
Okay.
the stone vaults speak to human construction, unless they're children. They could be children of the forest caves. I could see that, but I think the stone vaults and things like that are first men imitating or worshiping the children. We know there's an ancient weirwood there, so obviously it does have connections to the children. But I think, if anything, it's men trying to copy the children, trying to imitate them or to ape them, to gain their powers, live in their caves, those kinds of things. That being said, like I said, I could see the subterranean vaults also just being like sort of growing from organically the Children of the Forest caves under the
Mhm.
surface of the Nightfort. I don't think they built it or anything.
They may have
but-
given them the Black Gate, because that thing's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. The Black Gate definitely feels very.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
referencing mostly, is the fact that
Yeah.
there's probably the biggest weirwood in the world underneath it, but like
Mhm.
it's just been cut off at the top. All you get is the face, which you can actually animate, which we have seen literally nowhere else. So this
Yeah.
implies that the Nightfort and that the Black Gate is built underneath it is a huge part of its construction. That is a huge part of probably why it is so terrifying to people.
Yeah. Also, Painkiller Jane in the chat has pointed out there is the Stone Vault of Faces in the Ariane chapter in the Winds of Winter, which
Sure.
is said to be constructed by the children. So yeah, I mean, that's true. I had forgotten about that. That the children, it's not that they never built, I guess. Yeah. I don't
Well-
think they built a castle, but I could see them being the source of the foundations for what becomes the Nightfort, I guess.
And
They were
not
more
even,
Hollow Hill people.
Yeah. And
Sorry,
What?
Mallory was about to say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say, maybe they had something to do with building the very lowest floors of the Crypt of Winterfell.
Mm.
I thought
Oh.
that too, that maybe the Starks just sort of stole a
And
children's
built
city.
on.
Yeah.
Or maybe they took what was there and abandoned and built onto it. That would be super cool.
That, yeah.
I killed your train of thought, Michael. I'm sorry.
No, sorry, I was applying to Eliana. Yeah, I could see that, because I think there's an idea in there definitely that the children in their caves, that the humans have tapped into those caves, both
Right.
literally and metaphorically.
Yeah.
Whether it's Gendel and Gorn wandering in the caves, or the Stark crypts connecting to it. I could see that. And if the Nightfort has these vaults, then again, like, why not have that be connected to the network of deep places?
Sure. And Winterfell itself is described not only as a maze, it's also described as a great stone weirwood quite a few times. It even has the hot water flowing through it, resembling blood.
Hot water. Check it.
Yeah, it's kind of like they live in basically a statue to the weirwoods.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then they have the root system underneath where they store their dead, which is exactly what we see from Green Series. So, yeah, I think you're right in the sense that maybe the Nightfort is a perversion, or like kind of like a Lovecraftian. I'm not sure what the right word is. Maybe just like corruption, or people getting in over their heads and not understanding really what they're tapping into.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it would come back to the children in that maybe it's a corruption of their abilities and their powers, and maybe
Totally.
a corruption of their holy site, kind of like High Heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Eliana wants Mallory, she wants you to answer a question,
sorry.
which comes
What?
from Jojo, of whether or not this art will be available via calendar or what.
If this isn't considered too bloody for the calendar, I mean, and it's
I mean,
I kind of have most of my calendar pieces picked out, so I might just sell prints of this, or I don't know. I'm not sure yet. Lady Jojo Dane, I'll let you know.
It's such a cool picture. It's gonna be we're gonna put this up later as the cover for this, but I would definitely like to see this in other places. Like, this is one of your coolest things I think you've ever made. This is amazing.
it's
Glad
very
you're
cool
happy.
looking. Yeah. Yeah.
I think especially one of the coolest parts of it is that what we're talking about really links Jon to the Night's King in a direct way.
Yep.
That
Mhm.
especially as he is a king, just like an uncrowned one, basically, based
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
based on reasonable interpretations of inheritance. And the Night King, the Nightfort itself, this is kind of a point we didn't really get into, but
Mm.
we're basically told that the Nightfort is waiting for its king to arrive, almost in like a Lord of the Rings way,
Yeah.
where like the white tree that's underneath it, kind of like the white tree of Gondor, that
Yeah.
kind of thing, where it's a castle that has lost its king, it's a kingdom that's lost its king. And if Jon steps up, and by the way, if he kills everyone in the Nightfort and there's a weirwood underneath, that's a lot of magical potential right there.
That sure is. And it's interesting too that the weirwood is in a well. I mean,
well, which means they implied they used to dump blood into it.
yeah, right, exactly. Buckets of blood going down there. Now, I love the Minas Tirith connection though, especially because there's Minas Tirith and there's Minas Morgul, right? There's the fallen Minas Tirith, which
This is
used to be
probably
Minas
Morgul.
Ithil. It was Minas Ithil before
Yeah.
the Dark Lord took it over. But yeah, this idea of the king returning, but not a good king.
Well,
Not,
Minas
or-
Morgul had its own king,
yeah. Yeah.
the Witch King, which is basically what Robb Stark is in a weird way. That's a whole nother theory. Don't worry about it.
So
The
right
Iron
now,
Crowns.
I need an overlay of like the numbers and like geometry and stuff like over my face as I'm thinking about that one. Trying
Oh
to
yeah,
Trying to plug it in.
It's basically the idea that the Stark Kings of Winter are essentially the Witch King of Angmar, and basically all symbolism, all descriptive language, especially Robb with his crown of swords, which matches up with the number of ring wraiths, and Ned has his wraiths down at the Tower of Joy.
Yeah,
There's a lot more to it, but that's the basic idea. So
sure.
if Jon is the new Witch King going to Minas Morgul to claim it, then that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that would, and it would have to be claimed by blood, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because it's not really clear how the white tree of Minas Tirith grows.
Well,
Like,
I mean, it's a magic tree.
it's a magic tree. This is a magic tree too, one that talks. So, good question from Paincolor Jane. If this is the case, I'm assuming she's referring to what I was just talking about. What about Casterly Rock and its weirwood in the cave? Yeah, good. I love the idea of the Casterly Rock weirwood because it's almost like it doesn't belong there. Like they forced it in, because that's it's like weird and twisted and small. It's kind of like the weirwood we see in the Nightfort kitchen, the one that's coming up and trying to grasp the moon, where it's not one that's thriving, it's waiting for something, just like the Nightfort. Casterly Rock and the Nightfort are waiting for blood and a king to return, basically.
I'm down with that. I mean, I think a lot of the series is oriented around that. There were ancient forgotten things lurking just under the surface of very mundane, everyday. Lots of people working in Casterly Rock. It's a big source of employment for the region, but under that is it's capitalism
And the sewers.
Oh, the sewers are like the mazes, and Casterly Rock does have its own crypts, the Stone Gallery, I think it's called, where the lords of Casterly Rock are laid in a similar way to Winterfell, they're really the only two examples of those kind of tombs in the story.
Yeah,
And
it's the Golden Gallery. Yeah.
okay, sorry.
Um,
But
No, wait.
it is linking the three of them together in that
Mhm.
they're these massive stone underground vaults at all three places that appear to be connected to the children in some way.
So I'm sorry, I've become very distracted because Ned Braden made an amazing point in the chat, which is he says, I can't picture the architecture of the Night Fort in relation to the well/gate at the bottom of it. Something doesn't make sense, as if the fort sits much higher than the ground on the other side. And Stephen points out it's probably on a hill.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? I'm down with the Children of the Forest thing now. It's canon because yeah, if it's a hollow hill, then
Wiz the
yeah.
Smith.
What?
Wiz
Oh,
the
yeah,
Smith.
yeah.
He writes about the Hollow Hills all
Yes,
the time. This is his
yeah.
whole thing.
He does a
Yeah,
great
absolutely.
job.
Yeah, shout out. Yeah, no, if it's one of those hollow hills, that first off explains the logistics of, going down a well, out a gate, and popping out at ground level.
Mhm.
You have to start from up here, but also does make it one of those hollow hills, one of those classic places.
I think that's I think definitely the Night Fort is a Children of the Forest former city. Maybe a place like High Heart, a place like the Isle of Faces,
Sure.
somewhere where something hugely magical happened once.
Mm.
And I always like the idea of, this is very off topic, but I like the idea that the Night's Queen is underneath Winterfell as like a permanent prisoner. That was the point of it. And I would not be surprised if in the stone vaults or somewhere deep underneath it, maybe trapped within the Black Gate itself, there's some dark figure from the past, maybe the soul of the Night's King, the soul of the Night's Queen,
Sure.
something like that,
Yeah.
something that needed an armed guard around it to keep it safe.
Yeah.
Or like maybe an ancient in a Lovecraftian way, maybe like an like a temple to the outer gods kind of thing, that they've been like, this can never happen again, so we're putting soldiers everywhere to make sure nobody can get back here.
Yeah, right. There is a question from Fake Aria for you.
Oh, she wants to know more about...
Yeah, she wants to know more about your theory. I dropped it in the chat for you there.
I talked about this about Con of Thrones a bunch. This will be a video at some point, but it's the basic idea that when you talk about the ideas of dire wolves coming from the north, and you talk about Winterfell, which if you rearrange it is Fell Winters, which is the way that Tolkien describes magic coming out of the Witch King and how he used to invade people, and the idea of the wraiths and the ring wraiths themselves, you can very easily see the Starks of Winterfell as servants of Sauron, as the Witch King of Angmar, but before he was revealed to be a ringwraith, because a large part of his history is nobody knew who he was. He was just a magical winter sorcerer that showed up with a bunch of magical beings bound to him and black Numeronians and all these other things. So when you look at Robb Stark, you look at him as a character who, you see him from Jon's eyes, you see him from Kat's eyes. He's a person. But if you look at him from a more non-subjective viewpoint, and really what his iron crown with the swords on it and what his sigil is and where he's coming from, he looks exactly like a villain out of Tolkien.
Sure, yeah. I can see that. So what do you think about the like Aragorn's army of ghosts? How does that tie in here?
Some people have said that may be closer to the others. I like the ring wraiths particularly, but the idea of a fallen king who commands the dead or magic is very in line with what we see from the Starks and the others and the Children of the... Why did it zoom in so far on your face?
That was fucking weird.
It was awesome.
That was very scary.
I was watching it happening. I was like, what's happening? Is Michael doing this on his own? But a fallen king with an army of ghosts could very easily describe the way the others look now, basically. And George really loves playing with the ideas of Tolkien and trying to rip apart the ideas of good and evil within them and put them more as real things. Not always real, because Song of Ice and Fire is not a real world, but
It is not.
he very much dislikes the ideas in Tolkien that there is absolute good and absolute evil, and he likes mixing them. So he gives you the Witch King of Angmar, but he gives you in a character you like, basically.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think that's definitely a big part of why he's writing this story, is revisiting. I mean, he's talked about that with the very basic aesthetics of like the Watch and the Kingsguard, how the Night's Watch, they wear black, but they're the good guys, and the Kingsguard, they wear white, but they're kind of the bad guys. Yeah, they're all assholes. Which obviously it's more complicated than that, but that very basic, subverting the tropes that he does. That's my subverting the tropes voice, by the way.
That's the basic idea of this. And like when we look at the Night's King in the coming season and the Nightfort and all these legends, we're being shown absolute evil, but we should expect them not to be, basically. Like as Jon goes on a killing spree in the Nightfort, like we think, there should be empathy you have for him, or empathy, not sympathy, but you should understand why it's happening. There should not be absolute horror and evil like the way there was in Lovecraft and Tolkien. He's doing a much subtler thing with his characters.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely the ethos here, and that's what it comes back to with Jon, butchering his own men at the Nightfort. It's that undercutting of what you might expect from a very standard fantasy protagonist like Jon.
Yep. Literal last call for questions. You only have like the 30 seconds of delay before we start wrapping up. Let's pop over to Sanrixian and show off the amazingness that looks like Gengar behind it. That's amazing.
Gengar.
Probably because I've been playing a lot of Pokemon.
I mean, fair enough. Gengar is a terrifying character. Last call, guys. Get in your questions. This is such a cool picture.
Oh my god.
The angst on his face, the way he's conflicted about what he's just done, but also the anger is so perfect, Sanri.
Well, let me pull here the inspiration image for that.
Oh yes, this is good. I sent her a bunch of pictures before we went live.
Nice.
Jack walking through the maze at the end of The Shining.
Perfect. Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And then for the bodies, I sent you another one.
Yeah, and for the body, I kind of made them all Night's Watch brothers.
Well, yeah, you can't make them with the picture I sent, but
it does look.
Hold up. There we go.
It
is the daughters of the previous caretaker killed with the axe and blood splayed everywhere.
Amazing.
So we went for a really gory, really blood splattery Gengar Josh. Oh my god, I just called Jon Josh.
Amazing.
Josh Snow.
Josh Snow. That's what he'll become when he comes back from the dead.
Well, this is Lord Snow right here.
Yes.
Oh man.
What's going on with his sword?
It's covered in blood and tilted forward.
It kind of looks like it's on fire.
I kind of did the Valyrian steel whirlies, and then you can see the ghost pommel right there.
Are you saying maybe it's got a little bit of fire and blood? Is that?
Oh,
my camera.
Ice and fire.
Ice and fire. So I at the end of the stream, because we're wrapping up here, I really think this image, in a very precise way, really shows what we're talking about. Like, this is what you should expect from the Nightfort and Jon coming forwards. There's so much horror, there's so much foreshadowing, there's so much anger in his story and in the place itself, that this is what should happen. It shouldn't just be Sam popping out and being like, oh, he's not the thing that came in the night. There should be real horror coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Real horror.
Real horror. Real horror hours. Who's up?
Woo! Got any closing thoughts, you guys?
No, I mean, this was objectively right, and everyone should suck it if they don't agree. No, I'm just kidding.
She just said Josh equals Valencar.
Josh Snow is the Valencar. I think that's our closing thought.
Yes, right? Josh Snow.
Josh Snow, the Valencar. What if that's actually? I don't think there is a Josh in A Song of Ice and Fire. What if that's the name of the Night's King? Josh Snow. Well, he's a Snow. He's a bastard. So there should be a first name that we haven't seen yet. That should be the name of the Night King.
Gosh.
Wait, Jeff didn't just show up, did he? Someone just said, "Okay, B-Fish."
No.
No.
Okay, good.
He's not here.
All right, Mallory, you got any closing thoughts?
I hope John comes back with red hair and white eyes. That's all.
Wait, red hair?
I mean, white hair and red eyes. Oh my god. I'm sorry. Oh, I am weak.
I wouldn't be surprised. It could happen. Yeah.
It could happen, especially with Fire and Blood. George is showing off his horror roots in very distinct ways. So if he's writing Fire and Blood at the same time he's writing The Winds of Winter, and Fire and Blood is horror filled, then
Yes.
we're probably not that far off.
Yeah. This is awesome.
All right, so let's do some plugs. Michael, plug your things.
Okay, so you can find all of my writing at the link that Stephen has been dropping in the chat. Thank you. Which is offmichaelsbookshelf.wordpress.com, where you can find essays like Return of the White Wolf. I also have written, I've written a whole bunch of things about Aswaf. I also have recently archived all my old Reddit posts on there, Reddit essays and things like that, including Ripples in the Dreamscape, which I think is another one that people have tended to like.
That's a good one.
They should read it for the coming future for some reason.
It might be relevant in the future. In addition to writing about Aswaf, I've also done a bunch of episodes of a podcast I called Fantastic Transmissions, which will come back at some point. I've just been busy, which was looking at science fiction and fantasy short stories and discussing them, analyzing them. And of course, you can always find me on Maester Monthly, your favorite pseudo-monthly podcast hosted by the moderators of the Song of Ice and Fire subreddit, although I was not on the last episode of that one, which was hosted instead by Mighty Isabel, Eliana, and...
No, somebody else hosted it. This guy hosted it.
Oh, that's who it was. I couldn't remember.
I did a bookshelf impression. I tried my best to do the way you just said the intro.
It was a solid bookshelf impression. But yeah, you can always check out Maester Monthly to find more of me and Matt together.
That's the best.
All right.
I think that's it for me.
All right, Mallory, plug the things.
I'm Sanrixian, and I like to draw stuff. You can find my stuff at the links that Steven has been so nicely dropping in the chat. Sanrixian.com is where you can find my merch and stuff. I'm hoping to get a calendar together. It's almost there for you guys to buy pretty soon. I've got t-shirts, and this will be available as a print, hopefully after the holidays.
Please do this, because I want this print. Send me a print of this. This looks incredible.
Okay. Yes, sir.
This can go in my background and everything. This will be great.
Yeah.
And you're also going to be on a stream tomorrow, right?
Yep. And tomorrow, as is tradition, is Starry Wisdom Sunday. We're doing a Fire and Blood reaction panel with Aziz, Melanie, I think Profoot's daughter, whole bunch of people. And it's Lucifer Means Lightbringer YouTube channel at 3 Eastern, as is tradition.
Woo!
So I'll be doing some super... I'm trying to decide between a really nice, like, Queen Alsane and King Jaehaerys piece where they're flying the dragons, or like a really badass, gory dragon battle. So
nice.
Send in your opinions to my Twitter.
Love it.
Fair enough. All right. And for me, obviously you're on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JoeMagician. Make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell button. The bell button tells you when I go live and when videos have showed up, because YouTube is bad at sending notifications to people. Make sure you do those things. You can also find me on the Maester Monthly podcast as well, on Watchers on the Wall, where I recently covered the Fire and Blood release event in Jersey City for them. That was a lot of fun. If any of you guys were... Well, I know Courtney was there. Courtney Maza. She bought me more whiskey. Even though the whiskey is meant for Michael, I drank it on your behalf and got nice and wild.
Excellent.
I did you well, Michael. I did an impression. Let's see here. What else? You can find everything from me on my blog, clankingdragon.wordpress.com, where everything gets cross-posted. I'll probably be changing the name so it makes more sense at some point. And as I've been referring to, there's some stuff coming up for me. The next video will be with Bookshelfstud, who will be reading the quotes. It will be the idea that came from the prophecy live stream with LML and Aziz and Crowfoot's daughter, the idea of Dany on the pyre rippling through the dreamscape of the Targaryens and how that one moment basically influenced their entire family and explains just about everything weird that's going on with the Targaryens. And I can confirm from the Wild Night in Jersey City that we will be having a guest with us. One poor Quentin Emmett Booth will be joining us to talk about it. He is very excited about the idea. And he loves ripples in the dreamscape, and he loves this kind of magical bullshit stuff. So that'll be a lot of fun. Poor Quentin of Nauticast. And at some point, I'm going to be going on Nauticast myself to talk about Renly versus Stannis.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
And they've also at some point to do the Jon chapter where he tries to flee the Watch, to talk about Aemon and all that other fun stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And more stuff coming up. For Patreon, I'm just gonna do a quick thank you to all my patrons. The podcast that drinks that knows things, History of Westeros, Mystica Fairy, Bill, Colin, Piano Diva, Scott, Mary, JL, Lone Stark State, Ephemeretta, Steven Stark in the chat, and Ahmad.
Hey.
Steven doing the Lord's work. Sanrixian, she's a patron. Crowfood's daughter, Stein, Marilyn, Clint, Robert, Painkiller Jane, Caffrey Stark, LML, Baal the Bard, whatever she calls herself, Gretchen, Anime Lover, Heather, Lady Shar, Nauticast, Johan, Casey Duhan, and Jeff Hartline. Thank you guys so much for everything. And you're about to be rewarded because it's a good thing that Eliana's in the chat, because you're going to get your first patron-only episode. Eliana and I will be talking about the idea of bastards, cripples, and broken things as a main theme of A Song of Ice and Fire and a way of understanding the series and all the other very cool things that go in with that. We have a lot to say about those topics. It's a very interesting idea.
I'm really looking forward to that. That's gonna be
Well, you have to be a patron, Michael.
I'll just get Mallory to email me the MP3.
This is piracy. Your ass is getting banned.
That's right. I'm gonna go to start my own subreddit.
Start your own. Yeah. I have my own subreddit. And you're
Gross.
I have two subreddits actually. I have Fluffy Dogs and Joe Magician. Check out Fluffy Dogs.
I do have my own sub. I do have a r/bookshelfstud. I think it's private, but the banner is just a tiled image of hot pie. So maybe I'll make that public for a period of time. I don't know.
Please do.
Please do that thing. So with the Dany pyre thing, that will be a video and a live stream. Obviously, Michael will be on the video and the live stream. Poor Quentin will be on the live stream where we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for us. We aimed for about an hour and a half. We went a little bit closer to 2.25 hours. I'm not sure if Quinn and LML are still streaming, but if they are, you should go check them out on Ideas of Ice and Fire. They're talking about Fire and Blood right now. And I'm sure their takes are very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, I'm really curious to listen back to what they've been doing. So go check that out.
If somebody could drop a link in the chat to the live stream for Quinn.
Got it. And they are still alive.
They are still alive. Yeah, they're going to talk for 5 hours. So I think, this is a very condensed idea we were talking about, but a really cool one. This maybe should have been a video, but I felt like this was the better way to present it because it's more of a discussion thing.
Yeah, no, I think this is good, and I like talking things through with you. It's good. It's a good way to work out our fun ideas. So thank you for having me on your live stream, friend.
Oh, thank you for coming, Michael, and thank you for the art, Mallory. Both of the things you produced for me were incredible. This picture of Night King Jon is just perfect.
I hope you enjoy it.
I will. All right, everyone go check out Quinn and LML. I am sure they are talking up some magical bullshit and symbolism, and it's great. All right. See you guys later.
Peace.
Bye.